And it looks like we're live. So, well, welcome to our monthly webinar. This month, we've got a real special surprise. We've got Deidre Diamond from CyberSN and also BrainBabe. Our topic this month is preparing your team, setting everyone up for success at your trade shows and in-person events. So we want to really spend time at it, and there are folks on the call today and from really all over the world who are going to come at this from different perspectives, have different needs. And just so you know what our format is, Deidre and I will have a whole bunch of different topics we'll get into with regard to this topic. And then many of you have submitted questions, and we'll get to those, as well as you're more than welcome to share any additional questions in the chat feature on YouTube here. So feel free to do that. And certainly we can always have conversation afterwards as well. So with that, Deidre, welcome. It is so great to see you and have you a part of our call today.
Yeah, likewise, Bill. Such a pleasure to have found you out in the universe doing what you're doing, because the information is super helpful. So I'm looking forward to this talk.
Cool. Well, good. Well, we've had a lot of anticipation of this conversation. Some really interesting people I know are listening and watching what we're going to talk about. So let's hop into it. And maybe the first thing to do, just so we have some context and people understand a little bit about your background and what you're doing now, but maybe you could take a minute or so and give an overview of CyberSN and also BrainBabe, really very different enterprises. But if you could give us a bit of an overview of those, that'd be great.
Sure, absolutely. CyberSN was founded just about 4 years ago. I'm the founder and CEO. We are the cybersecurity network. We are the largest cybersecurity staffing firm in the United States, and we focus on both permanent and contract roles for information security professionals. And really, that company was born of my 13 years doing IT and tech staffing, and then the founders of that organization taking me over to Rapid7, which is now a public cybersecurity software organization that I happen to be the first VP of sales with. And that's really where I got introduced to, quote, events and conferences, was that time of my life. And that was almost 15 years ago. And so CyberSN is the combination of my security experience as a social criminal justice major. I fell in love with these people in cyber, and of course being a staffing guru of talent in the era of technology, having 400 recruiters reporting to me for a very long time, it was a natural fit for me to combine the two, knowing that this industry really needed help, because job searching's broken, right? Like finding each other online is not like going for a date, right? And soon it will be. We are making that happen. And so along my journey in CyberSN, it became apparent to me by attending events and just being in the wisdom stage of my career that we were still very challenged with what is termed the booth babe concept. And that is hiring models to work events and attract men, because the population is 90% men, to get their contact information. And a few years ago, RSA, which is one of the largest cybersecurity events in the US, put out a note saying, let's stop this madness. Let's dress these women differently. And it really hit me of A, great, we're doing this, and B, wow, well, what about training them? What about their brains? And it just came out like, let's make them brain babes. As a woman who doesn't have a tech degree, who's made her whole career in tech, who's become very successful in tech, I find it simple that we need to open jobs tech for everybody, and we need to encourage everybody. So I said, let's make them brain babes. And then as time went on and I started publicly speaking about this, I realized that who can solve this better than me? Meaning staffing conferences. I said to myself, these are great jobs for students of all disciplines. And so I founded brainbabe.org, and it morphed into this business of staffing these conferences. And it is a .org, and we do a lot to bridge the gap in cybersecurity, as well as support women in equality and inclusion and training to communicate in the workforce in a capacity that can get them more success and it's an evolving, sort of business for us, and we're super happy about it, and it's been really cool to be a part of.
I mean, what a great idea, and certainly critical for the whole STEM and STEAM community in terms of engaging more young women in tech and cyber and so on. So if I had the hat on, I would absolutely tip it to you. That's it's really cool to see. So you have a lot of experience at events, certainly with your with the staffing work that you're doing, but now really even a much different perspective in terms of actually staffing people for events, not just staffing cyber professionals, but actually staffing the various people in the booth for events. So can you share, because you're participating in events in really kind of two different ways, one in terms of promoting CyberSN, but then in a whole nother way with BrainBabes. Can you, maybe focusing on CyberSN for the moment, how does CyberSN typically participate? I know you speak quite a bit. My sense is you exhibit as well, but are there other ways that you participate in trade shows and events?
Sure. Yes. So the last 15 years, my participation has advanced from attending and working booths as a sales leader to speaking at events, to include keynote in pretty major events, and now staffing events. So I have this wide 15-year view of what's been happening there, and it's complex and evolving for sure. The events have come to what I see more of a networking opportunity than a direct targeted lead opportunity, although I think that there's ways to do both. However, what I see is that, time is never anybody's friend in today's world of business, and the prep work of attending these events is minimal. And so I think a lot of people have settled on it being more of a networking / scanning, somehow getting somebody's email address. And one of the reasons why I, enjoy talking to you when we met not too long ago was that you're really out there providing a service to help people take it back to the way it started, which was really targeted lead gen back 20, 25 years ago. And so I really put my time and attention to all of it, so what's our brand, show up like, and then what are the results we want to get out of this event? And networking is a given. That's, there's a party every other foot, and they go all night. And, at most of these events anyways, there's certainly different types of events. And so it really is, I think, a bit overwhelming because how big these events have become, to really figure out how do you get more out of it than sort of brand awareness and networking.
Right. Right. And that's certainly where the strategy comes in, and preparing the team certainly seems like an important part of that. And so I guess from your experience, why is preparing the team important? Why should we pay attention to it? Why should we invest in it?
Right. Well, these events are expensive. So just getting a booth is a lot of money, never mind having to staff, the cost of the staff being there, the cost of the staff not doing their current daily job, and the cost of travel and hotels, right? So from just a pure CEO perspective, cost is one of the reasons we need to care, and that we need to show an ROI. And then the other is that best practice of just doing business is having measurable, goals, measurable expectations, and people in general, humans, thrive on measurable expectations. And so I see it as, if you want the team to show up and be cohesive, if you want the team to show up and really perform, then they must know what they're measured on. Because if we leave it to everybody to figure out for themselves, it's really going to be a bit chaotic, and that's what I see. And so I think the importance is the cost and the spend and really being able to show an ROI. And it's also the reason we need to prepare is your brand is being represented there. And if there isn't a cohesive message, if there isn't a cohesive look and feel, if there isn't a cohesive, upbeat attitude because everybody's on the same page and they know what to do versus nervous and not really sure and you know, feeling confused, well, that's going to show up. That's really going to show up in the event. And that's where people can feel that. We have six senses. People just walking by can feel it. You don't have to talk to somebody to know that they're not comfortable, right? Or that they're not prepared. So it really is a lot of the hard measurable things as well as the sixth sense that people are walking by, tons of those folks. What's the energy? What are they getting? And it is the preparation that allows us all to feel like we can perform and not worry about what we're going to say or do or not be unsure of it. That comes, people feel that.
Right. So if I were going to summarize the sort of ROI, critical, then the brand building and sort of the energy that comes out of your booth from that. And I'm maybe reading between the lines, but I'm also sort of hearing an importance in the team having a sense of accomplishment or fulfillment from that. So some level of their success as well is driven by that and their sense of success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We all want to know whether or not we are doing a good job. Yeah. And the only way to know is to, before we actually complete a project, how we're going to be measured. And with that comes greatness. And also what comes with that is these people are smart. They're humans. They have brains. They can hear what you think the results are as the leader and have time ahead of time to digest and think and maybe come back and offer ideas and suggestions and better your plan. I mean, my goodness, that happens a lot in my world. I create mental safety so that people can, and I also give them the time for things to process in their brain so that they can offer me goodness too. And so, you know, the preparation time will also allow for creative ideas that
totally
we all
makes sense.
need to be thinking about, because it's like a barrel of fish. You know?
Yeah. That totally makes sense.
Fish. Is that the fish you want? You know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a wonderful metaphor. We actually, that's an example we give a lot, and there are actually 20,000 species of fish in the world, and they all like different types of bait. So you better figure out who your fish is and what they like, or else it's going to be a really long trade show for sure. So, you know, it might be good to talk for a few minutes about sort of challenges. So my guess is if you haven't had a challenge in preparing your team, you probably have a client that has. And is there an example that you can share about maybe a show, whether it was, you know, sort of a CyberSN opportunity or something you worked with a client, but where the team wasn't as well prepared as they could have been, and kind of what happened because of that?
Yeah. Well, I certainly have my own story.
I didn't mean to out you on that.
There is no way you start this 15 years ago and not have stories. And again, also not having people like you out there or even content to make me think about the things that I learned. So most of what I have is through wisdom and therefore mistakes. And so, you know, there's the basic ones, right? The shipping is really super duper important in terms of, does the hotel even, you know, have or the event have a way to deal with shipping? What is that? Yeah, I've been in situations where certain ship carriers don't ship on a Saturday or a Sunday, and we thought they did, and so we went with the wrong carrier, and therefore our stuff didn't show up until Tuesday, right? So you really can't assume that people are shipping every day or that there's a way to receive the shipping. And of course, you want to buy the insurance and the protection that your stuff gets there on time. And so that, you know, learning that's painful.
The idea is not to learn it twice.
Exactly. Super the idea not to learn it twice. So from the basics of logistics, that lesson, and of course the preparation lesson, of course I learned that, and just watching my team be scattered, watching everybody, sort of not feel prepared. And so getting that doing. And then I would say the more difficult things for me were figuring out how to measure the results at first, what is it that we expect to get out of this? And I think that is very individual. And I'd like to talk more about that as we go on. And then the most, unexpected one that, believe it or not, hit me even recently again was preparing women to work the booth and what it means to work a booth in still a time and a day where we have unconscious biases of men thinking that if a woman's at a booth, she's a booth babe, or she's in marketing, or she's sales. She clearly isn't much, even if she's in sales or marketing. And so there's that education of how an unconscious bias, like talking about it, preparing folks how to handle it, both men and women. And then there's the direct harassment that still happens that, I've had happen even to my students, at events, and forgetting that, holy moly, I need to really educate and train how to handle that. The negative energy, the negative comments, meet me after work, or you've got a nice set of whatever, or right. And that stuff, it still happens. I mean, and I pay, of course, close attention to this when I'm at events and sort of document everything so that I have my, sort of facts and understanding so that I can help everybody hear conversations when I'm walking by that are so inappropriate. Men talking, they're so and loud enough to where I can hear sexual conversations about somebody that's standing over there, or we'd like to do this. It still happens.
Oh, I just a couple of weeks ago, I walked a lady out of a major networking event because a guy was making inappropriate comments to her. So I totally get it.
Yeah, so I've actually been a part of supporting a woman by the name of Jane Franklin, and we should get her on your show because she's created a code of conduct for working events, for sponsors, for people of power at these events, and such that there are, not only pledges but repercussions to behavior, right? And what I've worked on is helping, and I still do, is helping take that further to what is the behavior that ought not be here, to even say you're gorgeous is inappropriate. This is business. And it's inappropriate for a woman to do the same, or to touch, physically touch somebody, right? Which is seemed okay for women to do to men and not for men to do to women. And I don't want to take away from the women having the worst of it. However, it does cross platforms, if you will. And so that's been really a work in progress even. However, the number one mistake that I don't ever want to make again is ever sending women to an event and men to an event not having this discussion. And talking about what to do, how to handle it when it's happening, how to support each other, what you can do to avoid it as much as possible, right? Those types of things. And so I think it's super important because unfortunately we're still in this mess.
Well, let's stay on that for just a minute, and so let's just kind of maybe put that a little bit in a box and call it orientation. And I would imagine that your orientation sometimes is for first-time event exhibit or participants, so maybe they're going to be in the booth for the first time, or they're long-time folks. Do you find that people that have been to 10, 20, 30 shows still need a reminder of whether it's the sort of protocol and the sort of the more sensitive things, or even just this sort of, all right, here's how we're going to make sure we make the right connections and all that. But do you sort of invest a similar amount of energy, I guess the basic question is, in the people who are first timers versus the sort of regular participants, or is there a different apportionment?
Sure. Well, I really look at the regular participants as the leaders of the working the booth and the role models, and those who I hold responsible for handling incidents, as the leader. And so I want them there. I want it front and center. Again, the fact that it even happened to me says, it says I wasn't even doing a good enough job at preparing. And so it really is that serious that this team must work together. And so it isn't necessarily like, oh, you've done an event before, therefore you know everything. It's more this team. This team may be the first time together. It's certainly, maybe it's the second, but it's not like the team stays the same across volume events. It doesn't. And what's most important is that the team hears, thinks, and perceives what's expected of them versus sort of the basics of how you work an event, if you will. And so, yes, absolutely. And we need to go even further to have documentation that's sent to everybody after these conversations to say, okay, here's the written part of what we're talking about. Because, we as humans, we absorb things through all our senses. And so we want to also have that written sense of, here's what you do when a situation happens. Here's how it needs to be handled. Here's how it needs to be reported, and dealt with. And those are things that we need to take really, really seriously, because again, we're moving into a generation where the punishment will be severe to this behavior, and yet will still require a very professional way of handling. And it's not comfortable and it's not fun, and so you don't want the first time, even dealing with it to be the first time. You've got to role play. You've got to, say, okay, so this happens. What do you do, Michelle? What do you do, Joe? You're the leaders. How do you handle when so-and-so comes with this? And when so-and-so has this happen, how do we want them to handle it after the education? We need to do some role playing, because I can tell you in my situation that happened just recently, we were sort of all over the place about how to handle it, and that in itself distracted from the event and distracted from what we were doing. And the time it took us to really get our heads around what do we do was a lot of time.
Sure. So besides this sort of the role playing of the codes of conduct and those elements, are you also role playing, for example, the company's value proposition, or how you might do a self-introduction? What else gets sort of practiced as you're orienting people and preparing them for a trade show or an event?
Without a doubt. That's the 101 of everybody goes with the elevator pitch. Everybody goes with the pitch of that day. Certainly the vision and mission of the company, and that verbatim it rolls off their tongue. So ideally, not ideally, if my salespeople are there, that goes a lot faster because they're saying it all day long.
Right.
Marketing people are writing it all day long. They're hearing it all day long. Are they necessarily saying it all day long? I don't think so. And so I absolutely believe that is critical. And so, and then what's also critical is who's saying what to get what done with the folks that are stopping at the booth, and I think that's the hardest piece, right? And I'm sure you find that too, Bill. I mean, that's probably where you spend most of your time with your clients, is really identifying what's the result. And I think that's where it's less orientation and more the strategy. So you got to start with the strategy. And then once I had that, I can add that into my orientation of rolls off the tongue, must be able to say this, that. And so, yes, they are, both are equally important. And it's certainly not choosing one or the other. And as we can tell, and having these conversations, there's a lot that goes into this prep. both
Yeah.
strategy and orientation. I like that orientation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now we've talked a little bit about in the event itself, and maybe the preparation before you brought up sort of the idea of logistics, how do we ship stuff and all that, and I would imagine prior to the show or event, if you have, whether it's 5 or 10 or 15 people going to a particular event or involved in going to an event, you're undoubtedly breaking up the roles and tasks pre-event and during the event and even after the event, and sort of apportioning that. But the folks that are responsible for the logistics, you had mentioned kind of an interesting thing, I think, when you were talking about the orientation for in terms of role playing and the preparation for communication and sort of the activities at the event. But when the logistics seems like it's something where you would have a fair amount of institutional knowledge that would happen over time. We've done this event many times before, and we have these experiences and have these bits of knowledge, or just based on our all of our experience. How do you, as there are new people getting involved with the logistics, how do you make sure that they're prepared and can be successful in terms of executing what they need to? And this is actually, we had a couple of questions about logistics and shipping. Apparently, that's a pain point for some, not just yourself. So how do you make sure that all that institutional knowledge from the years gets passed on to the next generation?
Yeah, so we have institutionalized a Google Doc that goes out after the event, and we require everybody within 24 hours to put their real-time feedback, anything and everything that comes to their mind, both positively and negatively, and just free form, put it all in there, right? And then one person's responsible for sort of taking that data. And over time, we've gotten more structure to those docs, but you don't want to sort of just ask 3 questions and let it go. You want everybody to just brain dump in there, because there's always things that you're just like, oh my gosh, who would have thought of that? And doesn't matter how many shows we've been to, right? And so that is really, really huge for us. And then before we start the strategy session for the next time we go, we're reviewing that doc. As a prep to the strategy. And I think that, with the new folks coming in, there ought to be a separate meeting, of course, with them as well. Because if it's their first time, or even if it's their first 5 times, there's role-playing work to be done, and why not do it? It's really an hour, it could be done on video. It really is worth it. And so, yes, the new folks need even more time, and they definitely need to be walked through the delivery of product and things that are there. And the whole idea of, if the event allows you to set up early, like the day before, invest in making that happen, and utilize that to have a dry run there on site, as early as you can, type of thing. And so the new folks need a more hand-holding. I just wouldn't say that they couldn't get everything that they need with the group participation. They could. It's just, if you've got people that are shy, or who are really nervous about doing it, they're doing it to fill in, they're doing it because they have to, they're doing it because they love the company, but it's really not what they want to do, which we know happens. Those people, of course, they're going to need more time and practicing talking. And it's going to be hard practicing talking even around their team, because those folks with that profile. And so doing it with their team and sweating through it will help them so much, to not be the first time they're doing it, or the second time, or the third live with client or prospects, let's say. Right. Yeah, I think that's huge.
Cool. And you earlier you'd mentioned the use of the team that's been to several events, and sort of those informal leaders or even formal leaders. How are they incorporated into the preparation or the role playing? How do you utilize that experience?
So I look for one person to be responsible overall. So there's one person that I am going to absolutely, me personally as a CEO or head of sales, which I've occupied that VP of sales title for a very long time. Uh, I'm holding one person accountable. And yet by holding one person accountable, I'm holding them accountable first before it ever kicks off to a plan of who they're holding accountable. You know, I've made the mistake of you're accountable, therefore all's going to go well. And situational leadership taught me that if they've never been accountable, then there's a lot more hand-holding that needs to be in terms of this situation. You manage people on situations, you don't manage them on title or, you know, what they ought to be able to do. That's silly. And so, I require them to tell me how they're going to be held accountable, meaning how they're going to set their teams up, and that really comes down to a schedule. Right? I want a schedule beforehand of who's working what hours. And I want in that schedule, I want to know when do the doors open? When are we allowed to set up? Excuse me. When do the doors open? Who's at setup? Who's there when the door opens? And then I want to know what time we break down and close each day, and who's there throughout that entire time. And I also want to know with the break, I want the schedule formed around the breaks of the event, meaning when the trainings are out and people are really out talking to vendors is when the booth needs to be staffed the most. And so are they thinking that way? Are they setting up for that? I know for me, I like to send my sales leaders to events, and I also send more junior folks, and I have them, the seniors are definitely there during the time when everybody's out of classes, and then when they're not, they're working. You know, they're talking to their current clients and servicing them and their teams and what have you, right? So I have to see that. I have to. That's what and so I don't have any problems holding somebody accountable when it's all right there. It should go smooth. So that's what I do is. And it could be one person per day. Like I'm about to take off and be an event for one solid week. It's actually 2 events in 1 week in the same place. And there's different people for different days that are, you know, at different events. And so that it's not necessarily one person for everything. And yet there ought to be this master schedule. And everybody has access to this master schedule. And that's how I as a leader of that spend, if you will, that money that we're putting out there, I use that to really measure: are we gonna have success here, along with the results that we're measuring, and do I think that they're the right results that we're going to measure?
Sure. So that's sort of talking about the event itself in our time and how we manage it. There, maybe we could spend just a minute on, I guess depending on who you listen to, somewhere between 70 and 90% of event success is determined before you even show up, right? It's all the preparation work that you do, and it's like so many things. If you're prepared, generally more success follows. And so, and I'll maybe try to ask this real specifically: is that one leader or that one point person who sort of owns the event and they build the schedule? Is there a parallel schedule, and how are people empowered prior to the event for all the activities that need to happen to show up and be successful? Because the event's actually kind of the easy part, I would guess, and it's making sure that when you show up, there aren't these little fires or many fires that need to get put out, and they may be logistical, they may be sort of, do we have the right people, do they know where to go? It's all those kinds of things. But yeah. how do you because is there a parallel schedule of all the milestones, all the pre-event milestones, to the one that you talked about for the event itself?
Yeah, because and I apologize, there's background noise here. I'm going to shut my door because I wasn't expecting company this early.
Sure.
Real time. I'm on a conference call, ladies. You're early.
Life happens.
You're an hour early. So you know what happens a lot to this that comes to mind, Bill, when you're asking this question, and it's super maddening, is that the schedule of the event isn't correct.
Mm.
And so when I think about extra prep of the prep of the prep, that is one that just seems to continuously be a big challenge. Is that the doors open at 8, but they really open at 7, and you don't find out until you're there, and so or it closes at 5, and then you find out it closes at 4 because there's some event at 5 that wasn't on the schedule.
Right.
And so I think it's really critical that the schedule is last and literally the week before. I mean, you just got to plan that everybody's going to be there on the dates. For sure, and you can have that sort of started. But we call the event coordinators right the week before and say, okay, we don't even just say, we've learned not to just say, has the schedule changed at all? Because yes, no questions are the kiss of problems. So instead, check your facts. So I have here that 7 a.m. doors open for vendors to come in. Is that correct? Is there any other time we can come in? Even if you've asked it in the past, I'm telling you, the week before, everything comes to life for them. Mm-hmm. They understand everything, and so it changes in their world too. And so getting all those facts checked of what time you think's going to happen, to include my speaking talks sometimes. It's like, oh, it's wrong in the schedule. It's like, what? How does that happen? But it does. And right. So, and then last minute, lots of times there's parties that are, or networking hour that's added. And, oh, by the way, if you want to give away a raffle, you can, but you didn't know. And so those calls that week before are super important. And then I suggest you sit down with making the schedule real and concrete and solidified in terms of who's where doing what, because it's a regular that things change, get added.
Yeah, no, it's certainly dynamic. There's no doubt.
Printing wrong. I see it a lot, Bill. We see print. The things that are in print were printed wrong, and what are you going to do? People instead they send out afterwards messages that it was printed wrong, or the app is different than the booklet that's given out. Like, check that too. Like, get on the app, check the app, compare it to the booklet, find discrepancies, because it's not fun finding them while you're there. It's not fun.
But yeah, ultimately, it's the sooner you know, the better. Totally makes sense. So I want to make sure that we kind of identify the key components in terms of team prep. And I guess if just based on what I've heard so far, and maybe, and I just so you know, when I'm looking down, I'm taking notes and stuff, so I'm not paying attention. But so one of the things that I'm hearing that is really a key that you've sort of built around is having that point person who sort of owns the event, and they're responsible for developing the event plan and the key milestones and all that, and obviously empowering others to support the effort. Is that correct? And what else?
I would clarify two things. It really depends on the size of the event, because the person that can be held accountable for how the event goes can definitely be different from the person that's accountable for setting up all the pre-work, giving the pre-information, meaning like most of the time it's my sales leaders who go and my marketing leaders who set things up and help guide the preparation and set up the meetings and set up the content and get the content and call the event coordinators and grab all of that. And so they're really responsible for bringing the correct content to us all as a team so that we can, prepare and strategize. And then the day of is typically the leader that's working the booth and around and it's there. And so there's a difference between those two accountabilities, particularly if you have a sales and marketing group and you're large, have that separation.
So it sounds like you have someone who's responsible for the setting up and logistics and then maybe an on-site person who's responsible for the team that's actually executing the trade show.
And if both of those people are attending, then they're both accountable.
You're right. Sure. So
if they both go, it's like equal accountability here, people. You both of you, yes. Yeah.
Right. Cool. So what else would be a key component of team preparation besides having sort of a clear assignment of responsibilities? What else is
so we talked about who's saying what to get the result we want. What's the dialogue that each person's responsible for? I would say also, this just happened to us recently where we've got new iPads, or excuse me, new mobile tablets for our event, and nobody tested them prior. They set them up, but they didn't test the real-time application of them.
Yep.
And so it was a terrible experience. They weren't the right type of tablets, so forth and so forth. So I'd say it's not just the dialogue that needs to be practiced. It's the technology or the demos or the whatever they want to show or use at the event prior to the event. I mean, you have that stuff before you ship it. So really make sure it works. Make sure that whoever's going has actually utilized it, seen how it works. That tablet thing was a bummer for us. That's how we were getting people's registration information. And it was somehow, it wasn't a touchscreen. How'd that happen, right?
How is there a tablet without a touchscreen? You found the one tablet without a touchscreen.
I say to my team often, because they make one mistake, they think, oh, well, we'll save money. Like, right. $20 costs me 20 grand. What are you even thinking? Whoever, it never did get that mentality from me. But I find it loving and endearing, and also like, oh my goodness, holy, yeah.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
So the idea of sort of testing.
Yeah, and a lot of people are doing demonstrations now at events, or using technology to sign people up, or the scan. I've seen a lot of problems with the scanning product. So have an alternative. That's another thing of being prepared. Like, we know the events give us scanning things, but sometimes they don't work. So what's going to be your alternative? Are you going to collect business cards? Are you going to, use your cell phones to take pictures of people's badges? Which is something we've had to do just by being in that situation. Hey, our scanner's broke. If you mind, I'm just going to take a picture of your badge because it's got the name and title of the company and their name, right? And so you got that. And hey, here's my card. Make sure that you've got the business cards that you want to give to them. Again, if the scanner's not working, that's going to be hugely important. So that you're exchanging business cards. But, anything that we sort of rely on to make sure that things go well, you got to have a backup plan for it not going well.
Mm-hmm.
And an alternative way of handling that task that you want done.
Sure. Let's go to one more topic, and then we'll go to our audience questions. So early on, you had mentioned the sort of the interest and need as kind of one of your three big pillars, the interest and need to measure results. And and that, I would imagine that comes in a couple of different flavors. One is measuring return on investment, and then also measuring individual performance or team performance, which might be sort of parallel, but probably a little bit different as well. So maybe let's take the ROI side first. How do you, and it's probably evolved some, but how do you today measure your ROI from events?
The first thing I do before I ever even, sign up with an event is ask for the event list of attendees, not the actual attendees, but the personas of the attendees that attend their events. Like, you've done this event before, what's the personas? And I really take that persona and I break it up into percentages. Sometimes we'll get, it's CISOs and it's practitioners and it's this or that. It's like, okay, now give me a percentage breakdown. Is it 10% CISOs, 90%, 50%? What is it? Or practitioners? And so I have to know the personas of who's attending, And I need to know the percentage breakdown of the amount and the amount they expect overall. So if you expect 500, what percentage of CISOs, what percentage of practitioners, what percentage of what? And then with that, I, of course, decide whether or not we want to be at the event. If I decide we want to be at the event and now we're down the road months later sort of strategizing what we want to do, I look at that content again, I absorb that content, and I say, okay, based on where we're at today in the organization's focus of sales and who we sell to, what population is there of that, and how are we going to target that population from a perspective of low-hanging fruit. So, for instance, when I go to an event, even if I decide I'm going to an event and only 20% of the people that come are my current target for low-hanging fruit of sales now, sales this quarter, sales getting in my pipeline now, then I'm always gonna focus on that, and yet I'm always gonna focus on how did we show up? What was our brand like? What did people experience for us? You know, so that I separate the two. I separate the personas where I can get business from now, and then and the persona of my future business, and certainly the persona of my current clients. You know, what percentage do I think of my current clients will be there, and what do I want to make sure is there for them, right? And so I take those three personas and I create measurable, and the only way something's measurable is if there's a number applied to it. And I take measurable results that I want based on the persona and the amount of people that I know is possible being there, and I do that very realistically, and I bring the whole team into my thought process of how I come up with this, such that if I'm missing something, I'm off, or they again spark something that they think of, they can tell me. And so this is how my strategies kick off. Like, we all get in the mindset of the persona that's going to be there, how much of that persona, of those personas, how is it divided? And then we just visualize that. We put that on the board, and then we say, okay, what do we want? How are we going to make sure that we are performing for all of these people?
Yeah.
And then it goes from there into deeper and deeper conversations based and you know, sort of where's the company at today with its sales message, its customer message, and its future customer message, such that we then develop our strategy for measurable results. So for instance, if you know, we're focused on the new business that we can get now, and we think there's going to be 200 folks of the new business there out of 600, well, then I know that I have got to make it such that those people know we're here just visually, you know. So maybe it's the CISOs, and we say, you know, so there's a sign that says, CISOs, come here X, Y, and Z, or come, you know. So there's the visual, like, how do I draw them in? Because if there's 200 out of 600, how's that going to happen, right? And then also the material that I send out beforehand will be around that. And so then I say, okay, if there's 200 of them there, I want a minimum of a contact, you know, with 50. You know, and here's why I think 50 will happen between our marketing material beforehand, and then just if 200 out of 600 are walking by, that's a fourth or whatever it is. And so we're going to get, you know, and I sort of just use math and take it that way. Or appointment setting, you know, let's target that group prior for appointment setting. I mean, a lot of times, you know, these events do give us the list right before the event of who's attending. And so those messages and having sales call and marketing messages go out to set up appointments. So it depends. Do I have that list? Am I going to get that list? When am I going to get that list? You know, all depends on what's the measurable result that I'm going to hold people to. And so that list is critical for me, and really saying, okay, we better talk to 50 CISOs at this event, you know, or
so let's just take that math. So let's just say there are 50 CISOs. And you measure the number of appointments that you get either pre-event or post-event, I would imagine. And then do you also track that to revenues?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, without a doubt. Okay. Without a doubt. Okay. And we look at that every time it's time to renew an event. What did we get out of last year? We certainly absolutely. So this is critical. Every time you sign up for an event, your CRM must have that event under lead source immediately. So for me, the minute we sign something, the department gets, notified that this goes in the CRM from marketing to sales operations, and then it's right. So it's that sales, when they're working that lead, so to speak, hey, they know it, but really when you close out the deal or the win-loss, you have the data of where the lead came from. So absolutely. So we have that system set up that when a PO happens for an event, sales operations is notified. It gets put into the CRM as a lead source. And it's the name of the event, the year, the location, sort of just see it all right there, right? So RSA 2018, San Francisco, SF. Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's go to the some of the audience questions. So I think there's some really good ones here. We're talking about prepping the team, and probably and certainly somebody in staffing, this would be near and dear to your heart. But the question is, how do we find the perfect team member? Mm-hmm. Because you can have the greatest training program, but if it's built on people that aren't A players, then it's probably not so good. So that's got to be a huge part of this team prep, is making sure you first select the right players, or how does that fit into your methodology?
Yeah, super duper tricky, right? Because you can also think you have the right person, then last minute something happens, right? So I mean, of course, the good news is there's firms out there like you and BrainBabe.org that can staff if you're in a pinch, or if you don't have the people to begin with, or you want to outsource it, right? And I think people ought to take that very seriously. I'm actually moving into that model more, as much as I love my sales folks there. Some of the smaller events, it doesn't make as much sense. The big ones, of course. And so I think it's a combination of, look, the right person is somebody that wants to be that person, first of all, that wants to go, that wants to be accountable, that is super excited about it. And if you don't have that person, then you need to prepare for mediocre results, or fix your problem, send somebody else, hire somebody to go. And I think that needs to really be looked at before you spend the money on an event, because I'll tell you, I judge all the time as a buyer when I'm walking around vendors. I'm a CEO of a software company. We build software. I'm looking at technology. We have a cyber team. We're looking at technology. When I walk around events and I see people slumped over, not disinterested, on their phones, on their computer, I know that company's culture isn't dynamic. It's not state of the art. And I don't care what you're selling. It's your culture that I'm buying, because I want it supported. I want to know you're going to be around. I want to know that when I call support, I'm getting people that want to support me. And when I see that stuff, I'm thinking, oh boy. And so is everybody else,
It's amazing how we communicate, right? It's not just it's not just what we say, it's what we do and what people experience of us. Yep. So I'm just looking at some of the other questions here. So here's an interesting one, and maybe we can talk about your role playing a bit. So the question is, and maybe not, we don't need to necessarily go into the specifics of a conversation, but how do we prepare for it? But the question is how to start and end a conversation, how to frame it. So, I think of the people that you have in your booth, whether they're supplied through BrainBabe or in your own CyberSN booths, what is the role playing pre-event look like in terms of, is it multiple sessions? Are there sort of multiple scenarios that you play? Can you kind of give us a quick highlight of that?
Yeah, so whether there's multiple depends on how well they did in the time that I scheduled with them on the first time.
Let's extend the exercise.
Yes, exactly. And my number one goal, and I have a number two as well here. The number one thing is, coming from sales, you're judged in the first 30 seconds, right? Yeah. So you've got 30 seconds, and that's when you start. It's already happening the minute they see you from across the way, and so it's what I'm looking for is posture and demeanor, and then how do you introduce yourself? Like, how do you go engage that person? Like, you gotta, just because you made eye contact with them or it seems like they're coming over to the booth doesn't mean they're coming over to the booth. And so, I'm looking to say to folks, okay, look, your job is to greet people such that they feel comfortable stopping. They're thinking about stopping. They're wondering, like, I literally, if the people in the booth aren't trying to get me to stop, I don't stop unless I had a reason to be there. I mean, honest to God, because if they're not, then I don't think they really give a shit about what they've got. And I'm not interested in hearing some really bad pitch, honest to goodness. And it all just happens in the brain, right? And I watch myself. I walk by until somebody gains enough of me to stop. And then I stop. And so let's practice that. What do you need to look like, stand like, be doing in order for people to feel comfortable stopping, and because it is not comfortable for either people most of the time. And then what's the first thing you're doing? For me, it's the, hey, how are you handshake. Like I'm a human, they're a human. We all love that. Hey, how are you? Nice to meet you. Put out my hand. My name's Deidre Diamond. And then they're going to give me their name. So now I can use their name. They can use my name. We've made that instant, like, human basic handshake is how we say hello. Now, other countries may be different. And I don't have as much experience there at all. I do know that in Japan, you have to hand the card a certain way and hold it both sides, or it's very disrespectful. In China too. And yet, in the United States, the handshake really sets the tone for a professional conversation and also gives somebody an opportunity to make that connection. And so I'm looking at that in my role play. And then what comes after, and depends on what we're practicing. Are you the person that's supposed to, demo the product? Are you the person that's supposed to also qualify them for whether or not they have a need to buy right now? Are you the person that's supposed to just get their contact information when everybody else is full and maybe help them stick around a little bit so that the more senior people have a chance to talk to them? What is your role? And I'm going to practice that. So really it's about the practice of their role, but everybody's got to have the practice of how do you attract them to even stop and engage. And what's your first intro, that handshake.
It totally makes sense. I'm looking to my right just to see the questions that were submitted online here. Oops, I think I'm talking over you, Deidre.
No.
Oh, okay. That's, I forgot there's a time delay on what I'm seeing here. So I saw your mouth moving without any sound because the sound's turned off. So let's see. I think we've covered a lot of these questions. And so I know we're kind of at the end of the hour here. Maybe if you have a sort of a final thought or two that you want to share, and then I have a couple updates I'm going to share as well. But if you want to, if there are any final closing thoughts you want to make sure people know in terms of that team preparation and how to do it or why it's so important.
Yeah, I think I will wrap with saying that, all humans, we all want the same things. We want to know how we're measured. We want to know what means we did a good job, and we want to feel good. And it's in our DNA to want to feel good. And so, make those things happen for your team, for each other. It's possible. It is time. And yet it's time that if you don't spend, you're wasting time, right, and money. And so enjoy that process.
Cool. So that engagement, I love it. That's really cool. So, before I thank you, I'm just going to share a couple of August dates with folks. We have 2 webinars in August, which is a bonus month for sure. So on August 8th, we have coffee and one of our coffee and conversation sessions is Pavilion Pitfalls. Move from a Greek tragedy to business recruiting hero. So this is more for economic development folks who run pavilions at sort of major trade shows. This will be a really cool session. And then getting back to our normal theme of working with growth companies who are looking to scale, get traction at scale. Our August 22nd conversation is around leveraging the entire trade show. And this is sort of subtitle is uncovering and exploiting all the components and added value. So we often find that people leave a lot of money on the table by not taking advantage of all the opportunities. We have a neat guest with us for that as well, Laura Parker, or I'm sorry, Palker, from Trade Show Solutions Center. So she's had a lot of experience at leveraging all the components of trade shows, so that should be a lot of fun. But cool. Deidre, I'd have to tell you, this was wonderful. It was such a pleasure to speak with you today, and we'll be sharing for those that had to drop off or came in late. We'll be sharing this recording, and certainly if you'd like to do the same, please feel free to share it with your community as well.
Awesome. Awesome. It was my pleasure too. Thank you for getting this content out there. It's super easier to learn it not through wisdom.
It shouldn't all be through experience, right?
Exactly.
Thanks, Deidre. We'll catch up soon, and it was a total pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye now.